What's going on, tubers and trollios? Welcome back to telesplashgaming, and I'm going to keep going with the rare and collectible games playlist today. And the next system up is the OG Xbox, a game system that I've been collecting for, and I've been fortunate enough to get a couple of these rare games. But if you've been out looking at Xbox games, if you've been looking to find out what the rarest, probably the most expensive, the hardest games to find while you're out doing your game hunting, I'm going to give you a handful of games to keep your eye out for, and if you can find them for a good deal, grab these immediately. Stick around, let's take a look. Starting off this list, come on, we know where this is going. The old trollsters got this one complete in box, Steel Battalion. It's the rarest, most expensive game, but really it's not because the game itself is so rare, it's because you require a full-on mech simulation in order to play it. You have to have the big pedal, the 40 buttons, you have to have an area to set it up, and if you have it complete in box, it takes up a large space in your game room. But you know what? I love it. I'm glad I have it. And for many people, this is a holy grail Xbox game. It's not the greatest game of all time. It was made by From Software, which is a company known for their Dark Souls series, Sekiro, Bloodborne, but they put out a few other games, and this is one of them. They have this ridiculously large mech unit that originally came out, and it was $200. That alone makes it the most expensive Xbox game alone. So when you think about that, that's why this game is still so expensive. If you're lucky, you might be able to find it complete in box. If you're somewhat lucky, you'll find it at least open box somewhere and probably get a little bit better deal. So for collectors out there, this is one of the rarest and definitely the most expensive because of the pedals and the full-on unit. But hey, to say that you have a mech simulator is pretty badass. All right. Give me a hell yeah if being the President of the United States, jumping into a mech suit, and battling against the Vice President across the United States doesn't sound like a fun game. That's exactly what Metal Wolf Chaos is, and it only saw a Japanese release. That's why this game is so rare. But people love the game, it got good reviews, and it takes place in America. It's actually in English so you can play the game, but for some reason we never got it over here. Even though it's literally about as blue-blooded American as it gets, it was a Japan-only game from Software. Again, the second game out of 2 on this list, but it's rare. It's fairly expensive. Now here's the cool thing. If you want this game for your collection because you're a collector, it makes sense. But they just came out with a remaster for the Xbox and the PS4 that you're seeing footage of, and that's an easy one to pick up for a fairly reasonable price. So if you want to play the game and enjoy it, get the newest one. But if you're a collector, this is definitely one that most people know about. Unless you're new to collecting, fairly expensive, fairly rare, fairly badass. Okay, I'm done talking about From Software and mech games. Or am I? So we're moving on to something else. An adult-themed cartoon called Futurama was super popular in the early 2000s. If you were around then and watching cartoons, you might have watched it. But like a lot of series, it got the old cancellation ovation, and the series was over as soon as it hit. Here's the deal though, there was a game in development called Futurama. Imagine that, pretty original. It came out for the PS2 and the Xbox. I think the GameCube was supposed to get one, but it was canceled. So with that, it wasn't popular as much because the series was already dead by the time the game came out. Here's where the kicker is. The game had so many cutscenes though that Futurama fans realized this was basically another episode in Futurama, and it all took place in the same universe, so it made sense. So with that, this game is a mediocre like 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 mixture of hand-to-hand combat, there's shooting elements, there's platforming. You play as like 4 different characters, so it kind of gives you a mixture, but none of them are really great. The game really isn't that good other than, if you're a fan of Futurama, it gave you a lost episode of sorts. So that part of it's pretty cool, and enough that they actually took the cutscenes and stuff and made a separate video out of it. So Futurama is actually a fairly rare, somewhat expensive, and incredibly collectible game for the OG Xbox. Moving on to a franchise that's been around for a long time, got its start in the arcades, and we're talking about Outrun. Now the game in particular is Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast. Now there was a couple games that came out. The Xbox had Outrun 2, but Outrun Coast to Coast came out towards the end of the Xbox life cycle, got limited release, but the game is actually really good. It is a remake of the first game. Not really, the first game's so arcadey that I hate saying it's a remake, but it's a reimagining of the first game, and then it also includes a lot of Outrun 2 into it. So it kind of combines 2 different games into one game, so it's the more collectible and it's a good game. But most people will say just play Outrun 2 if you want to get your Outrun fix, because this one is pretty rare, it's collectible, and it's going to cost you a lot more to get a very similar experience that you'd get to Outrun 2. The difference at the time though was Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast was actually online, which was really a somewhat unique thing for an Outrun game. I don't think that any other Outrun games were online. So you could play this game online. That was kind of one of its cool defining factors. But like many things, if it didn't get distributed very well, not that many people played it. If you're lucky enough to find a copy out in the wild while you're on a safari, pick this one up. Alright, so we're moving on to Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy. Now this is a compilation of violence. Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And I picked this up for $3 at a thrift store. So thank you to whoever's mom gave this to a thrift store because their kid moved out of the basement. I'm pretty stoked about that. And when I got it, I had no idea. This game is pretty rare and collectible, really for one reason. Rockstar Games puts out some amazing games, and when they put one out, people typically buy them day one. So if you already played Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, there was really no reason to buy this Trilogy compilation because you probably already played the games and had it. And because of that, this wasn't a huge seller. It was only until the Xbox faded out, the 360 became popular, and people started looking for collector's editions, and this became one of those compilations that you wanted to buy. You wanted to have it in your collection if you're a game collector. Now, if you didn't play those games, this was the best way to get it because it was the best version of each game, and you got all three of them for a much better price than they came out individually. But again, it's not that popular at the time because people had played most of them, so now it's become a fairly rare and collectible game, and I'm pretty happy to have it in my collection. You can see some of the footage here. It's got some really cool maps, it's got all the extras. It really is a really cool compilation consisting of 3 amazing Grand Theft Auto games. So if you're out and about, find this thing, get it for $3 like me, friends. Get it for $3 like me. Well, for every good deal I've got, I have paid out the like everybody. So Marvel vs. Capcom 2 may not be the rarest, may not be the most collectible, but it's one of the best fighting games ever made. And because it's so popular, that's what makes it fairly expensive even today. Whether you get it for the Dreamcast, the PS2, the Xbox, it's still a fairly expensive game. So I was at Portland Retro Gaming Expo and I picked this game up and I got it for like $40. Not a great deal. Got it home and realized it wasn't complete in box. It was complete in plastic, but I was missing the manual. So now I gotta go buy a manual online and I want to get one. So if you know anybody who's selling it, send it my way because I'm looking for a good deal. But with that, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is a fantastic fighting game featuring your favorite Marvel characters battling it to the death against your favorite Capcom characters. And the series was established well before this game and well after, but this is still considered the best game in the franchise. So with that, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is a fun fighting game. It's really popular, and because it's so popular, it's hard to find because nobody wants to sell their copy of it. So if you can go out and about and find this for a good deal, then you know what? Check it out. But if you can't and you gotta have it, you might be having to pick it up like me at one of the expos where you can get a somewhat decent deal, but you're still gonna be forking over that cheddar. All right, gamers, there you go. A handful of original Xbox games to get you started on your rare game collecting. Now these are definitely going to be the most expensive of the games you can find. There's a ton of Xbox games you can find for pennies, but if you're looking to get into some of the rarer games, some of the more collectible, then these are the ones. And the cool thing about gaming is the value typically goes up. So even if you do pay a little bit more than you wanted, if you're not looking to sell your collection, it doesn't matter. But over time, it will eventually go up, kind of like the housing market. It might dip a little bit, but it's going to climb back out from the trenches, and video games are no different. So with that, let me know in the comments below what some of your rarest Xbox games are. There are quite a few more, not like the original Nintendo where you're paying thousands of dollars, but you know, you can find some of these games for $100, $200. They do add up over time. So all right guys, as always, thanks for subscribing and watching the channel. Let me know what's going on in your lives this week. Keep trolling, keep rolling. We'll see you next time.